The government says it will take lessons from a crisis not so long ago, the floods in Queensland, and how that assistance was rolled out. Getting a first-hand view on how that's been happening is One Nation leader Pauline, who joins us now from Cloncurry in Queensland. Senator Hanson, thanks very much for your time. So you've been out there talking to people about the assistance they've been getting in the wake of these floods, which of course came off the back of droughts, tragically enough. What are they telling you?
Yes, I came up here straight after the floods, Tom, and it was devastating, and the community were cut off. Talking to the people now, they're very impressed and very happy with the response they got from the government at the time. So they received their aid, their assistance. The Army was tremendous, the donations that came in from people, the Red Cross. So it all pulled together. The town, look, the country's looking great, very good, and people have rebuilt their lives in the townships, and some of the tourism has come back to this area, so it's been great. It's given me confidence now that I hope the government will actually follow through and do the same thing for those bushfire victims.
Well, there's a call as well. I'm sure there's some room at the, the Gidgee Inn there in Cloncurry, so anyone thinking of a trip, they should head up there. When you're talking about the assistance and why it has worked, Senator, what are some specific examples of what locals are saying, whether it be business or individuals, the type of assistance that really worked well and helped them get back on their feet?
Well, the funding that actually came through, and there was a couple of things that I put to them, which was put to me by the locals up here. For example, the rail lines, at the old rail lines, to use them as fencing posts, although that wasn't the case. But they got a truckload from Western Australia that was brought over and donated to them, so they could use it as rail posts for them. So there was assistance from the communities, donations from the people that actually came through. There was a bit of an issue about filling out the paperwork, and I've heard that all along, even with the drought effect areas and the bushfires, they're very concerned about the lengthy time it takes to fill in this paperwork. I hope that is looked into, because these people, they're under stress, they're at duress, they don't need all this huge paperwork. But it did work quite well. A lot of people, they estimate anything between three quarters of a million cattle to 1 million head of cattle that were lost in this area due to the floods. So recovering that, building that all up again, which takes years to do. So, I think, considering the circumstance, and of course I'll give credit where credit's due, and I'll do constructive criticism as well. And I think, considering that Morrison wasn't long in the job as Prime Minister, they really appreciated the time that he took to come up here to talk to them. And we've got to consider that as well. What happened with the bushfires, he was there. The Army's response may have taken a bit longer than what the people would have liked, but the devastation has been horrendous. But, we've got to, do our best to pull together as a nation to try and do the best and help our fellow Australians.
You were pretty critical yesterday of the government's response to the bushfires, including even the amount, $2 billion, which they did say was an initial amount to help recovery. Are you saying now you've got more confidence? You think the government's on the right track?
Look, how they roll it out, Tom, I am still critical of only $2 billion. We've lost, hundreds, thousands of homes actually that have been, and businesses and people, and just building roads. We're looking at $1 million a kilometre to build roads, so $2 billion is not going to go far at all. So they've got to look at, rather than looking at a budget surplus, to get these communities and townships back on their feet. People need it. If we're, it's affecting our tourism, that's what we've got to take into consideration.
More money available. So that doesn't that say that they do have the priority you're talking about?
Well, I hope so, Tom, because it irritates people to think that we're giving so much money, billions of dollars, to overseas countries to help them, and yet we're not putting that amount of money back into our own country. This is taxpayers' dollars, and this is what I'm saying, is that we must look after our own and clean up our own backyard first, and that's all I've kept asking the government to do this. Townships are really hurting, Tom. A lot of these small towns are becoming ghost towns. They don't have the tourism. The country is looking quite tired, worn out, and you only get to see that when you travel the country. And my criticism yesterday was about the climate change. The Prime Minister never came out and said, look, it's a combination of different things. It's arsonists out there, people deliberately lighting these fires. You don't put it all down and listen to what they're saying, oh, it's due to climate change. That's not the case. It is not due to climate change. And let's put the true facts on the table, and that's what I'm saying. Let's have a real discussion about this and find the real answers and make sure it doesn't happen again, or try and stop it to the extent that it did this time.
Let's talk through a few of the facts. Yeah, certainly arson is a factor in Australia every bushfire season, but we did speak to Shane Fitzsimmons, the New South Wales Commissioner, RFS Commissioner, and he says the vast majority of larger fires have been caused by lightning strikes. Arson numbers are not large and have not increased. Do you take him at his word?
Listen, yes, there are. They estimate around about 87%. Of course, you've got 40% of it could be from arson, you know, people lighting the fires, and people have been charged over it for lighting the fires. And you've got about 183 have been cautioned or warned about, you know, fires, bushfires. Now, that's a large number, and people are purposely going out there and lighting the fires. And yes, we do have lightning strikes. We're always going to have that. But is that due to climate change? We've always had thunderstorms and lightning strikes. It is about the build-up of debris that's on the floor of these national parks. They don't go in anymore to clean them out. They don't allow the cattle to graze in national parks. They don't allow people to clear the trees from around their homes. We live in a continent that is built up with, you know, trees, eucalyptus that explode. It's the fauna that we have in this country that needs bushfires to go through it, to rejuvenate it. It's the country we live in. It's totally different to every other continent in the world. And this is the country, you know, Australia is.
Yes, and it's true. We have always had bushfires, and there's talk of different ways to manage that. I'm sure that will be part of the Royal Commission, including the Indigenous approaches to how burning's happening. But again, on fuel loads and hazard reduction, the RFS says their issue was it was too warm and dry to conduct all the burns they wanted to. They wanted to have more burns. It's too warm and dry. Do you take them at their word on that as well?
Well, of course we need burn-offs, and that hasn't been happening because councils have shut it down. People of the view, of Greenie's view, have got into local governments. They've actually stopped the control of this build-up of debris on the floors and around the
burns, Senator?
Tom, I hear it constantly all the time from people who put in to clear trees around their property. Sorry, you're not allowed to, or you can only clear 4 metres from your fence. Now, that's all the clearing you can have. Now, people want to have that clearing. They want to feel safer because they know they could get bushfires coming through. Councils are denying them from doing it. Now, I hope this is a big wake-up call to the state government and the councils. Also, the Queensland state government, you know, the Native Vegetation Management Act, that needs to be thrown out. You know, people want to, especially those people on the land, want to look after their land. A case in point, if you go out to Colomulla or Charleville out that way, we have what's called the mulga tree. The government stops them from cutting down the mulga tree, only in certain areas and so much of it, to feed the cattle. You can't rake it after that. It's left as debris on their floor, on their properties. They can't rake it, they can't clean it up, it's got to be left there. That is a fire hazard in itself. The way the government laws, that's the problem that we have. Let's get some common sense back into it.
Okay, I just want to go beyond the anecdotal though. I understand, you know, it's important to talk to people and find out what they're saying, but beyond that, what councils are shutting down hazard reduction, or what specific laws are you talking around clearing of trees near properties that have exacerbated these fires, for example?
Tom, I can't give you any name of a Pacific council. I'll tell you what, I'll tell the viewers out there, you contact Tom at Sky News and you tell Tom if your council has denied you from clearing trees around your property, cleaning up debris, putting in fire breaks, and let the people tell you what they think. I think that might be an indication, because it is happening.
Yeah, no, look, always happy to hear examples, but I just think it's important to, when people are talking about councils shutting down burns, what we're hearing from the RFS, and I asked the questions of them because I'm curious as well, as they're saying their hazard reduction was limited by warm and dry conditions. Can I ask you finally, Senator, you've said let's stop talking about climate change. Do you believe that was a factor in exacerbating the conditions for these bushfires?
Tom, our climate's changed and it always has changed. And if you look at the records, we've had hotter and drier conditions in the late 1800s, but they don't want to discuss that because, you know, those records weren't correct. Well, they were correct at the time, but no one wants to talk about it. Climate is changing, but it's a natural occurrence.
2019 was the hottest year on record, though, Senator, in Australia.
from record from when, Tom? Are they going back to when, the 1850s, or are they taking it from the early 1900s? Because they don't want to discuss that, because they don't want to discuss the 1890s. Well, I have a record book. I have a record book that takes me back to the late 1800s, the original record book on climate, and it was horrific, the climate temperatures that we had then, prior to industrialisation in Australia. So as far as I'm concerned, climate is changing due to natural occurrences, not what we are fed to satisfy those with their own agenda, or for those to make a lot of money out of it at the expense of Australians living a decent standard of living and a way of life in this country. I want the truth out there. I'm not going to get emotional about this and jump on a bandwagon because it suits a lot of people. Everything that I've done, I like to research and understand. As far as I'm concerned, these climate fanatics pushing their own agenda haven't convinced me or a lot of Australians, because I read my Facebook page and what people have to say.
You like to do your research. Have you read, for example, reports from the IPCC talking about the weight of evidence around climate change and warning what will happen?
Tom, they have actually been found out to be incorrect in their information that they have put out. When you have that carbon dioxide represents 0.04% of the Earth's gases, you can't tell me that's changing climate change whatsoever. The carbon dioxide in the world is 97% created through nature itself and the oceans. They have come out that they have not always got their reports correct. And we can send you that information if you would like. And I tell you what, I'm not an expert in this area, but I suggest that if you really want to know the depths of this, speak to my Senator, Malcolm Roberts, who can have a great debate with you on this and explain to you quite clearly, and who is challenging the CSIRO over this information that they have, or the documentation they have. Isn't it funny, even the Greens will come out and make these statements, but no one will debate Malcolm Roberts over it. So let's have this come out in the Royal Commission, which I hope that we have, into this climate change, and put the facts on the table, because I've heard from both sides, from science who say it is happening and science who says it is not happening. But we don't see the peer review to back this all up. And that's what I think that we need to have. If we're going to change our society, we're shutting down businesses.
Just to jump in there is a lot of peer-reviewed material on climate science. Just reading today, NASA, for example, puts it at about 97% of climate scientists talk about the man-made contribution. There is peer-reviewed material. That's a fact.
There is a lot of scientists who don't agree with this. There is a natural occurrence that happens throughout the world of climate is changing. I don't deny that. Is it man-made? That's another question that we need to ask.
No,
we cannot destroy people's lives, our own industries and manufacturing in this country. Escalating electricity prices that people cannot live a decent standard of living. For what? You tell me billions of dollars.
The vast majority... Just on that point, you can talk about there are some scientists that do cast doubt on it, but the vast majority do say climate change is happening, and with a strong contribution since the Industrial Revolution from mankind. That you can't dispute that fact. That's the majority of scientists do think that.
The temperatures before the industrialisation in Australia were actually higher. It actually went down when industrialisation happened in Australia, then it went up again in the 1970s. So it's not all due to industrialisation whatsoever. So climate change, you know, they're telling us that the Earth temperature is going to increase by 2 or 3% in the next 100 years. Where's your proof with that it's going to happen? They can't even get it right that it's going to rain on my property. They tell me it's going to rain. It's not even going to rain. It doesn't rain. So they can't get the temperature right from day to day or week to week in Australia. How are they going to predict it 50 or 100 years down the track?
Okay.
I'm sorry, it doesn't wash with me or a lot of Australians. So let's get it out there. Let's get the truth and stop destroying businesses and people's standard of living, way of life in Australia.
Happy to get it out there. We'll wait for the information from your office and perhaps continue the conversation another day. Enjoy Cloncurry. You'll be doing a bit for tourism, I'm sure. I've gone well over time, Senator Pauline Hanson, but thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers.